90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Our special guest is the editor of the New York Law Journal, Andrew Denney, and he'll talk to us about how the Law Journal has emerged from COVID and what features and editorials and court notices they include, the history of the paper and what they're looking for, especially contributions, and how they're aiming to keep the paper of interest to young lawyers, old lawyers, and the general public, and of course business people as we emerge from COVID. Andrew, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Hi, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking time out from your busy day to do the show with us. What is a day like for you working in journalism and especially at the New York Law Journal? What's a day in the Law Journal like and your personal day?
Oh, well, I wish I could say that every day is the exact same, but I think it starts off with us kind of have an all hands meeting with editors from around the country who are discussing the various stories everybody's working on all around, not just the country. We also have an international desk, so we're hearing what folks are doing in London, Hong Kong, and looking to see where we can have some overlap, where a story in New York might be able to play well in DC, for example, or something that from our colleagues in California might have resonance to our East Coast readers. It's basically everybody coming to the table and showing what's in their deck of cards.
And do you find today that the New York attorneys are more interested and perhaps the cases and issues being written about and analyzed in other venues are of interest and importance to New York attorneys?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, in a very general sense, we live in a far more connected, globalized world, and, New York lawyers, we have, not to get their egos up any further than they need to be, but, we do have the biggest legal market in the world and are one of the most prominent. And I mean, that means that we have folks here who are practicing all over the world. So what's happening outside of the five boroughs is very much resonates with our audience.
And over the past year or two, you focused on how COVID has affected the courts and the legal profession. So tell us about some of the things you've covered, how that has shaped your coverage, and how that has shaped legal practice and the world of work for lawyers.
Absolutely. Well, so much of in terms of just the work, from government attorneys to the big guys at the huge international firms, obviously everybody was doing everything remotely. We've been tracking the sort of transition back and forth between doing virtual and in-person, work. Every law firm has their own unique philosophy as to whether or not they need everybody back at the office or if everybody can continue working in their PJs back in their apartments. We've been tracking that as well as the effect on the court system, which they not only had to sort of figure out how to work, do their, sort of office work and what have you from a virtual standpoint, but also how to serve the public virtually and what sort of court proceedings could actually be migrated to the virtual realm and what needed to be held in person. We've been looking at various mandates and how they not only have been affecting the workforce in courts and in the legal community generally, but how litigation has been impacted by that. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of lawsuits over mask and vaccination mandates. So that's been top of list for us. And I believe most importantly, we've been keeping an eye on how this is exacting a toll on the mental health of a profession that's already pretty stressful to begin with.
And it's also rejuvenated certain areas of contract laws as people tried to enforce or get out of contracts and leases because of the impact of COVID and the various laws shutting businesses down.
Oh, very much so. That's sort of the piece de resistance of covering real estate law now is sort of a lot of commercial tenants in Manhattan, not only because of their workforce being affected, but obviously their foot traffic dwindling to almost nothing for so long. That's just one of them. A lot of folks fell deeply behind on their, residential rents, and there's a lot of case law sort of emerging around basically how COVID affected the real estate market in New York,
and also contracts as well, and that's and as a result of COVID and recalibrating after COVID, law firms are going to probably use less space, and people are going to commute less and work remotely. So that's going to change the nature of law firms as tenants or owners in the city and the suburbs.
Yep, that's something we've seen with a few firms as well. They're looking for a smaller footprint. A lot of them are, encouraging, or at least fostering the idea that a hybrid work model is going to be the way to go going forward. A lot of people like the flexibility. There are some reports that we've come across where, in fact, one of my colleagues wrote a story that the headline was something to the effect of, "Hey, you want to reduce the size of your head count? Require everybody to be back in the office at least 3 times a week." So the lack of flexibility is actually turning off a lot of lawyers. So yeah, going forward, it's and we don't know what kind of sub-variants are going to come up. Being able to be flexible and kind of be able to take whatever it comes, flexible not only for the wants and needs of the workforce, but also what may come in the future. I think that's sort of the watchword at this point.
And it's, as you mentioned a minute ago, it's forced the courts to be more flexible rather than a mass gathering and calling calendars and hearing cases one at a time and lawyers traveling hours to reach, or the clients and litigants traveling hours to reach court. That time and inconvenience has been reduced because of Zoom and because of COVID.
Absolutely. Certain proceedings in court are being held virtually to this day. There are just certain things that you really can't do virtually. Jury trial is still way off. I've heard reports of bench trials being held, for like commercial disputes where it's just a judge, the parties, no jury. I've had a judge in Brooklyn tell me that he conducted a number of those, but certain other aspects of getting the wheels of justice to keep turning. I mean, some of it moved to virtual and is probably going to stay that way. Conducting depositions is a great example. In the old days, the before times, whatever you want to call it, getting everybody together for a deposition meeting meant it could be years of getting, this person from Saudi Arabia to fly in and finding somebody in Saskatchewan to fly in. Now you don't have to have like all this travel time to come in and answer a few questions, right? So yeah, I mean, it definitely kind of reshaped how our courts operate for sure.
I've noticed from the pages of the Law Journal that you are talking more than before about the mental health impact of lawyers, of working hard, being isolated from their colleagues and clients, and the various pressures on them to perform and perform in a vacuum. So what has shaped your coverage on the mental health toll and perhaps even lawyer suicide and lawyers in depression and lawyers in drugs and alcoholism in the past year and what you see going forward?
I mean, as I noted before, this is already a very stressful job. You have rates of anxiety, depression, substance abuse that kind of trend above the general population. And when COVID hit, as you noted, isolation is real. Another big factor that came forward was the courts had to stop doing, as I said, you really can't do jury trials virtually. So that meant criminal trials specifically really could not happen. And we had, over a year of none of them at all. So in some cases you have criminal defense attorneys who are already juggling so many cases already. And through the pandemic, they were able to continue doing like the pre-trial litigating work, conducting the depositions, getting the discovery materials, etc., but no trial. And, then some of these guys have the clients out on Rikers that are just sitting there waiting for a trial that's not going to happen because, now the trials are resuming, but there's a huge backlog, right? So you have a situation in some areas of the law where it's all just sort of falling on you at once, right? And that kind of pressure, especially if you're dealing with clients who they're not at liberty, who are just sort of biding their time, not making money for their families, while they're just kind of, sitting behind bars and on Rikers or wherever. If you've got any compassion for your clients, it would take a toll, to say the least. And, unfortunately, we've had reports of lawyers taking their own lives over the last year. We had one in Brooklyn. We had my counterpart down in Philadelphia reported one from his market as well. There was a judge in Buffalo who also took his own life. Like I said, it's already a hard job. And, when you kind of throw in a global pandemic and a mass trauma of that magnitude on top of it, it can be a lot for somebody to bear.
And I noticed that you do have articles written by lawyers who, let's say, are depressed, who are dealing with depression, have tried to deal with it on your pages. To at least they're giving perhaps a roadmap to others, and they're giving a message to others that these are normal challenges and you can try to manage them a little bit. So is that one of your goals? Do you anticipate doing that more in the future?
Yes. I mean, it's imperative that we have attorneys with the bravery to come forward to talk about their own battles with mental health. I mean, on top of this being an extremely stressful profession, it's also one that showing any cracks in the facade could, whether it's a perception or it's a reality, but, that could be an indication to your client, your colleagues, your bosses that you just can't handle it, right? And their key weapon is their brain, right? I mean, that's...
And let's say their work ethic as well, to do whatever it takes to get the job done, to win and perhaps build those hours.
Their mental fitness is, you can't be a lawyer without some degree of mental fitness. Obviously, in some cases you could probably debate me on that, but staying tough and not showing any sign of cracking at all is often kind of the prevailing wisdom for the profession. And unfortunately, that might lead some people to just kind of keep it all bottled in and not express it or talk to somebody or, share their own experiences.
Just to remind our listeners that we're talking with Andrew Denney. He's the editor of the New York Law Journal. As you've heard, the reach of the law journals around the country and around the world, and it's many articles of interest to people involved in business or just concerned about the law and the courts and political developments. You're listening to Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City. Andrew, you also have people talking about their roadmap to success and perhaps very broad spectrum of lawyers, with non-traditional, let's say, background or personal pedigree, to just show that they are welcome, they've succeeded, how they met some of their challenges. Are you trying to make the Law Journal more open to people from all different groups, and they should feel welcome on their pages and in reading their pages as well? Diversity.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, because, the big major law firms with the big cases and the bold-faced names, yes, they're going to get a lot of attention just by virtue of being the big guys, right? And this is an issue, we do a professional excellence awards each year. They'll be coming up this fall. And, there's a perception when I talk to lawyers from smaller firms, they have a perception that, just to pick on like Skadden Arps or some other big firm like that, they're like, well, how much are they, how many ads are they buying from you? How come they win all the awards every year? And it's, we work hard, and it is a challenge to let the smaller, nimbler firms know that, you're invited to be part of the conversation too, obviously, and we've done a lot of outreach with mid-sized firms, and very recently we're launching a new, one of my affiliates is launching a new publication dedicated to the mid-market. It has been a challenge to sort of dispel this notion that all we are is sort of a newsletter for firms that have 1,000 lawyers,
Well, maybe some of your news pages, but your advice columns and your information columns, and of course the cases you highlight every day are of interest to everyone. The general practitioner, the person who dabbles in real estate or some other field of the law, it's like reading a hornbook with the latest information and analysis that might be of use to cases you are working on. And that's true whether you're in a law firm or you're a solo practitioner or with a giant law firm.
It's very true. And that is that's sort of the the filling in the middle of the Pop-Tart with our publication are these analysis pieces that, we have attorneys write to us, suggest to us. And I must note, a small plug, please, if you're an attorney out there listening and you feel that you have something to contribute to the conversation, if it's an analysis of a case that you're not involved with, or if it's your views on a major topic that's affecting the legal profession and, the justice system more generally, we take any proposals,
And even just pointing out the ambiguity in some statute law that hasn't been resolved by the court.
Absolutely. I mean, that's many of the columns we run are seasoned practitioners, looking at certain statutes, not just case law, but also laws, on the books, looking for where they can be fixed. A few years ago, we had a lot of analyses of the Child's Victim Act, for example, when it passed in New York a few years ago. So that's just to name one that comes right off the top of my head. But we've had a lot of the real estate bar writing in recently about the proposal to the eviction, the no fault eviction legislation that's sort of being debated in Albany right now. So yeah, I mean, anything in that realm. And want to hear from the community.
And you don't. The person could be a solo practitioner from a small firm. You would just want them to have a learned, knowledgeable, or piece of interest to submit to you.
Yeah, exactly. It's we're just like any other newspaper that we're not just going to, we don't have, like, for example, that thing that a lot of newspapers have where people just call in and say whatever comes to their mind. I mean, it's we don't want to use this as a catharsis, but anybody who wants a lawyer of any stripe, if you've got an important issue that you want to take a side on, you want to address the what you perceive as deficiencies in case law around a certain topic or a statute, we invite any proposal.
And if people have a view, an editorial perspective, you welcome letters to the editor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually the editor that goes through the letters to the editor, and it's, if it's if it rises above the level of a rant, if it's a structured, well-reasoned rant with good citations and what have you.
Yeah, people have pet peeves, and exactly. or opinions about things, and maybe there are other people with similar unspoken opinions.
Right, I'm even just kind of thinking out loud here, but there are so many things within, or not just the legal community, but the justice system, that they could be addressed more directly. Somebody wants to write us about the conditions of a certain courthouse, just to throw out an example. That we would love to hear something like that.
And you also have special sections about real estate, about patents, about criminal law. What are some of the other special sections you have? And also you welcome contributions to those special sections as well.
Yeah, we also take commentary for those special sections. Outside of, you mentioned real estate, we also have a technology page on Tuesdays, and on Thursdays we focus on the corporate law, corporate side of things. But a lot of that's in-house counsel. That's another community that we, myself and my colleagues in our affiliate publications, have been really trying to crack into that market. We feel the in-house counsel doesn't really like to talk to the press. I mean, they really can't, or they wouldn't have a job. So that's been a tough nut to crack. We've been doing what we can to expand to them. But and in terms of other sections we've had there too, we occasionally run a legal education page. Whenever there's a major event in the news, two of them specifically, I'll dedicate a page to that. Andrew Cuomo's sort of fall from grace, and the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. Those are just a few of the.
And you do analyze cases coming up or argued or handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court, important courts from around the country, as well as, of course, the Court of Appeals.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my colleagues in D.C. get SCOTUS, unless we've got some New York case with some direct interaction with it. But one of the kind of, in my mind, and our numbers sort of bear this out, one of the most imperative sectors of our coverage is covering the New York Court of Appeals. We're kind of one of the only publications that does it sort of wall-to-wall coverage of what's going on there, not only the kind of palace intrigue, as it were, or really just a fancy way of saying when they have a vacancy and it needs to be filled, but also its rulings. Our sort of core readership comes to us for that coverage of the New York Court of Appeals. So it's that's sort of our kind of our shining star there in terms of the things we cover.
And let's just take a moment, if you can give your contact information in case someone has a letter they want to submit, a column, want to inquire whether you're interested in a certain type of column or encourage you to cover a particular story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of the central point of contact for those kinds of things. If I can't help you, I point you to the right direction. It's my first initial and last name, which is ADENNEY at ALM.com.
And is there a website where someone can go and get some free information about the Law Journal, perhaps some articles, or see the calendar of events, or see some court notices or anything?
Yeah, our website is law.com/New York Law Journal, all one word. And you do get a number of free reads a month, as well as there are some features here that you don't need a subscription for. But that being said, we would love to bring you into the subscription family.
And also for lawyers or corporations seeking attorneys or paralegals, you have help wanted ads on. You have them in the printed paper, and you have online too, I imagine, because that's one way they can reach a targeted audience.
That's very correct. And on top of that, if you move around in the legal profession, we cover that as well. We have a column where we kind of round up everybody shifting around. But if it's kind of a major transition, we have like a former New York City corporation counsel joining a firm, for example, that might get its own article. So that is something like we like to keep a pulse that we like to keep our finger on, is where everybody ends up working.
And you also have a calendar of events. I mean, they include legal seminars, they include social events by various bar associations and even ethnic bar associations. Is that information available online, and can people submit things to that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a person that sort of coordinates the calendar, which, once again, if you just contact me, I can point you in that direction. And that email address, once again, is ADENNEY, ADENNEY at ALM.com. You mentioned social events, various other gatherings, but also, most importantly, continuing legal education events. We run a print and digital version of those. And since this is a requirement for the profession, we like to make sure that we're kind of a central repository for where you can find those events.
Now, let's talk for a moment about the front page of the New York Law Journal. How do you decide what news, what stories, what cases go on that front page? I guess it's decisions you have to make every day, too.
It is. I'm actually the guy that has to do that, too. So, I wish there was a more complicated formula I could give you, but quite simply, New York Law Journal needs New York news on the front. We need stories with a strong New York nexus. I will stretch that a bit if there's like very big news coming out of DC, a new Supreme Court justice, for example. A major case that's involving the White House, that I'll stretch for that. But if it's going to be on the front, it needs to be New York.
And you also have, we talked about the situation wanted ads, but you also have advertising where people want to reach lawyers. It could be an expert, an accountant, an expert witness, someone selling fancy clothing, whatever they think, or decoration services, or renting a house in the Hamptons. You have the audience that they want to meet, well-heeled people who have a need for certain resources and a budget for certain travel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's thousands of lawyers in this state, so it can be kind of hard to narrow down exactly which one you want. In fact, me not having I don't think I've ever retained an attorney in my life. I might have once, but I mean, it seems so random, right? I mean, it's like, I guess I'll just call that guy I saw on the subway, right? But yeah, we do have access to referral services, and just looking through our pages. I mean, the folks that sort of get their name out here by contributing to us. These are folks who obviously care enough about their profession to pick up a pen and send us a letter, right? And
I always tell lawyers that's very good marketing material. If you're writing a guest column, you can show it to your students, your potential your colleagues, your potential. It's almost like having a law review article. It's the closest thing a practicing lawyer can do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it pretty much is. I mean,
and it's going to be maybe more relevant than a law review article.
Right. Well, yeah, you're going to have maybe more people reading it, I hope. So.
And what about some of the cases you cover in print on the court decisions section? How do you select cases for that? And do you welcome suggestions from the courts or lawyers out there?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have an email address that serves as a central repository for those cases as well. It's decisions@alm.com. We often have judges' chambers submitting rulings in that, but we also have, lawyers that, sending as a way of patting themselves on the back, they'll send us decisions to that as well that went in their favor. We actually have 2 decision editors who sift through all of those, find the ones that they deem the most newsworthy, or I guess newsworthy might not be the best, but more that would be of wider interest to the bench and the bar. They synthesize those, and then we also we paste these decisions in a very easy to use a searchable database on the website. I'm in the process of kind of making that a little bit more visible, but it is what I consider sort of an indispensable resource that we offer in both in print and online. I mean, reading these decisions can help judges and lawyers kind of stay on the cutting edge of what's going on in case law.
And it's important that you be on the cutting edge, and your clients expect you to be on the cutting edge, good or bad.
Exactly right. I mean, this is a service I hope that we're offering, and that it's a service we are offering that I hope people know about.
And just very briefly, what are you thinking about looking to for the future?
For the future of our coverage, I mean, enduring. There's a lot of doom and gloom in media generally these days. We weathered the storm pretty well through COVID. We actually hired additional people. I was hired in the middle of COVID. We actually built a copy desk during this. I mean, copy desks are usually the first to go when a newspaper is looking to cut costs. I mean, other than, eliminating certain back office redundancies. But we're doing okay. And I know this might not be the most exciting answer, but I hope we can continue to endure. And there's certain things I have sort of underway now, like improving our visuals, kind of maybe giving us a little more interactive flavor in our online product. That's what I would like to see. A little bit more than just words, texts, and photo, and having the resource to be able to pull some of that off.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for being our guest on Law You Should Know, and for your contributions and help to the legal profession and keeping us going through COVID and as we emerge from COVID, especially all the human interest in lives of attorneys with good issues and bad issues that you've run. And you are a resource for attorneys and for the general public and those interested in government. If you missed any portion of the program, the podcast is available at nccradio.org. And please join us next week at this same time for another program on Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York.